Hi, welcome to Lightspeed Academy. I'm Jim Cooper, and thanks for joining me for this Lightspeed session on handling events in React. When you want to respond to things like a button click or key press, you do that with event handling. So let's explore how to do that. Here is our Outpost page that is listing a bunch of products for sale. However, there is no Add to Cart button to add these products to our cart. So let's work on that. But first, notice that we've added this new cart section over here that will display items in the cart. Right now, it's just hard-coded to show this one item. You can see that right here in our Outpost component. So we've got a cart array with a warp engine in it. And down here, we're rendering a cart component and passing in the cart array to that component. Notice if I add a second warp engine, that we now have two items in our cart. So this is all wired up and working, and I'm not going to dig into the cart component because there's nothing really new in there that we haven't already talked about, but the code is available in the video description if you want to explore it. Okay, so back to adding that Add to Cart button. Let's jump over to our product component, and right here, just above our product image, let's add a new button like this. So just a basic button with a couple of classes, and this Add to Cart class will cause it to be displayed on top of our product image when we hover. And now you can see that right here. When I hover this image, there's our Add to Cart button. But clicking it, of course, does nothing. So let's wire this up to add the corresponding product to the cart when we click this button. So back here in our button, we can wire into the JavaScript click event on this button by adding an onClick attribute. And the casing on this is important. So notice that the C in click needs to be uppercased. And then we just set this attribute to a function that we want to call when the button is clicked. So I could set that to an inline arrow function like this. Then let's just move these attributes down to their own lines to make this a little bit more clear. And now if we try that out, I open up my console. Notice that when I click the Add to Cart button, that it says Added to Cart. Now there's another way that I could code this, and that is to declare a function up here like this. And then down here in the onClick, I could just set onClick to that function. So now it'll just call the log function when the button is clicked, and you can see that this is working here too. But what if I wanted to pass something into this log function, like the product data? Well, then I need to go back to using an arrow function, and that arrow function will call the log function and pass in product data. Now when the button is clicked, it will call this function, which will call the log function and pass in the product data. Okay, so that's the very basics of wiring up to a click event on an element in React. So we are handling this click event, but we're not really adding anything to our cart. But we've got one problem. The cart doesn't live here in our product component. Rather, it's over here in our Outpost component. And that's because the cart needs to be passed into the cart component, which is rendered down here. This is a very common scenario where a deeper nested component needs to affect something on a parent component. And the way you handle this is that you define a function on the parent component, and then you pass that function into the child component. So let's create an Add to Cart function here. So this is just a function that takes in a product and pushes that product onto the existing cart array. This is a naive approach, and we'll see why in a second. But let's also go ahead and console log the cart for now so we can see it changing. Okay, now we'll pass this Add to Cart method down to the product listing component as a prop like this. And then in the product listing component, we need to pass that down into the product component as well. And we'll get that off of props. Okay, cool. So now in our product component, we have an Add to Cart function available to us. Let's delete this log function. And down here, we'll just call the Add to Cart function that we've destructured from our props. Okay, let's try that out. Well, unfortunately, we don't see anything getting added to our cart over here. But if you look at our console logs, you can see our array is growing each time we click the Add to Cart button. So we started out with 3 items and then 4, 5, and 6. And if we open those up, you can see that there are actually products in our cart array. So remember, over in our Outpost, we are just pushing that cart onto the array, and then we are console logging it. And so the console log does show that our Add to Cart function is being called successfully. So our onClick handler is actually working. But the problem is React doesn't know that our cart array is changing. Unfortunately, you can't just change data like this and expect React to know that it needs to re-render that part of the page. You have to be more explicit about changes you want React to re-render. So we'll explore that in our next video on handling component state. But the good news is our onClick event handler is working. And all HTML events work the same way, whether it's button clicks, key presses, mouse hover events, or whatever. You handle them all the same way. If you want to keep going, here's the next video on handling component state with the useState hook, which is where we'll fix the problem with our cart. And here is the entire Lightspeed React playlist. And of course, please like and subscribe if you'd like to see the other content we're putting together. Thanks and keep learning at Lightspeed.